The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand courtyard of the royal palace. Hundreds of people gathered behind golden ropes, their excited chatter filling the air like buzzing bees. Today was special. Today, the kingdom's finest warriors would demonstrate their skills before the royal family and distinguished guests from around the world. Captain Marcus Thompson stood at attention near the palace steps, his Marine uniform pressed to perfection. Every medal on his chest told a story of battles fought and won. His weathered hands rested calmly at his sides, but his sharp eyes scanned the crowd with the alertness of a man who had seen real combat. At 35, Marcus had served his country for 15 years, fighting in distant lands where the sound of gunfire was as common as birdsong. The crowd suddenly hushed as trumpets announced the arrival of the royal family. King Edmund appeared on the palace balcony, his purple robes flowing in the gentle breeze. Beside him stood Queen Isabella, graceful as always, and their young son, Prince Alexander, barely 16, but already showing signs of the warrior blood that ran in the royal lineage. "Citizens of our great kingdom," the king's voice boomed across the courtyard, "today we witness a celebration of skill, honor, and tradition. Our royal guard will demonstrate the ancient art of silent combat, passed down through generations of palace protectors." Marcus had heard whispers about this demonstration. The royal guard was famous throughout the kingdom, not just for their loyalty to the crown, but for their mysterious fighting techniques. They trained in complete silence, communicating only through subtle hand signals and eye contact. Legend said they could fight an entire battle without making a single sound, moving like ghosts across the battlefield. A door at the far end of the courtyard opened, and 12 royal guards emerged in perfect formation. Their armor gleamed silver in the sunlight, each piece crafted by the kingdom's finest smiths. Unlike Marcus's practical military gear, their equipment seemed almost ceremonial, decorated with intricate engravings of dragons and eagles. Yet there was nothing ceremonial about the way they moved. Each step was calculated, each gesture precise. Leading the formation was a figure that immediately caught Marcus's attention. This guard stood slightly taller than the others, with broader shoulders and a presence that commanded respect even from a distance. The crowd seemed to sense it too, falling silent as the guards took their positions in the center of the courtyard. Marcus studied the lead guard carefully. Through years of military training, he had learned to read people's movements, to spot the difference between a show fighter and a real warrior. This guard moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had faced real danger. The way he positioned his feet, the slight tilt of his shoulders, the careful scanning of his surroundings, these were the habits of a true fighter, not just a palace decoration. The demonstration began with a series of choreographed movements. The guards paired off, engaging in mock combat that was both beautiful and deadly. Their swords sang through the air without the usual clash of metal. Instead, each strike was perfectly controlled, stopping just short of contact or sliding harmlessly off specially designed armor plates. It was like watching a deadly dance performed by masters of their craft. But Marcus noticed something the crowd missed. While the other guards followed predetermined patterns, the leader was improvising. His movements were too fluid, too natural to be rehearsed. When his partner attacked from an unexpected angle, the lead guard adapted instantly, his response so smooth it seemed like part of the original routine. The crowd gasped and applauded at the display, but Marcus remained focused. He had seen real combat, and he could tell the difference between performance and genuine skill. This wasn't just a show for the royal family. This guard was the real thing. As the demonstration continued, Marcus found himself analyzing each movement, comparing it to his own training. The Marines taught direct, efficient combat designed for survival. This royal guard fought with elegance, but Marcus could see the deadly effectiveness hidden beneath the graceful exterior. The lead guard suddenly glanced in Marcus's direction. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the crowded courtyard. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Those weren't the eyes of a ceremonial guard playing soldier for the entertainment of nobles. Those were the eyes of a predator, sharp and calculating, weighing and measuring everyone around him. The demonstration reached its climax as the guards formed a circle around their leader. They attacked him simultaneously from all angles, a coordinated assault that would overwhelm any normal fighter. But the lead guard moved like water, flowing between the strikes with impossible grace. His sword work was poetry in motion, deflecting attacks that came from multiple directions without seeming to put any effort into the defense. Marcus found himself leaning forward, genuinely impressed despite himself. He had fought alongside some of the world's best soldiers, but he had never seen anyone handle multiple attackers with such ease. The guard wasn't just blocking attacks, he was controlling the entire fight, dictating where his opponents could strike and when they could move. The crowd erupted in cheers as the demonstration ended. The guards bowed deeply to the royal family before forming their perfect formation once again. But as they prepared to march back into the palace, the lead guard made an unexpected move. He stepped out of formation and walked directly toward Marcus. The crowd noticed immediately. Whispers rippled through the gathering as the royal guard approached the Marine captain. Marcus straightened, his military instincts kicking in. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew it wasn't part of the planned ceremony. The guard stopped 3 feet away from Marcus and removed his helmet. The face revealed was weathered like Marcus's own, marked by years of training and combat. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and a small scar ran along his left temple. But it was his eyes that held Marcus's attention, intelligent, alert, and carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much. "Captain Marcus Thompson," the guard said, in a voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. His accent was refined, educated, but there was steel beneath the polish. "I am Sir Gabriel Blackwood, Knight Commander of the Royal Guard." Marcus nodded respectfully. "Sir Gabriel." The crowd had grown completely silent now, straining to hear what was happening. Even the royal family on the balcony seemed intrigued by this unexpected interaction. "I have heard of your service record, Captain," Gabriel continued. "Your actions in the Battle of Ironbridge are still talked about in military circles. They say you held a position for 3 days against impossible odds." "I had good soldiers with me," Marcus replied, uncomfortable with the praise but maintaining proper military bearing. Gabriel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Modest as well. Tell me, Captain, what did you think of our demonstration?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus could feel hundreds of eyes watching him, waiting for his response. He could give a diplomatic answer, praise the skill and beauty of the performance. But something in Gabriel's manner suggested he was looking for honesty, not flattery. "It was impressive," Marcus said carefully. "Your men are well trained, but I noticed you weren't following the same routine as the others." Gabriel's smile became genuine now. "Very observant. And what conclusion did you draw from that observation?" Marcus hesitated. This felt like dangerous ground, but Gabriel seemed to be testing him for some reason. "I concluded that you've had real combat experience. The others are skilled, but they're performing. You were fighting." A murmur ran through the crowd. Several nobles looked shocked that a foreign marine would dare to suggest that the Royal Guard's demonstration wasn't entirely authentic, but Gabriel nodded approvingly. "Exactly right, Captain. You have a soldier's eye. Which brings me to my question." He paused, and Marcus could feel the tension building in the courtyard. Whatever Gabriel was about to say would change everything. "Would you be interested in a real test of skill? Not a demonstration for the entertainment of the court, but a genuine contest between warriors?" The crowd gasped. This wasn't part of the ceremony at all. Marcus glanced up at the royal balcony and saw King Edmund leaning forward with interest. Queen Isabella looked concerned, but Prince Alexander's eyes were bright with excitement. Marcus looked back at Gabriel. The challenge in those dark eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't about entertainment or diplomacy. This was about something deeper. Professional pride, the eternal question of which fighting style was superior. The need that all true warriors felt to test themselves against worthy opponents. "What kind of contest?" Marcus asked. "A duel," Gabriel said simply. "Silent combat, following the old traditions. No words spoken once we begin, no sounds made that aren't necessary. First to yield or first to be disarmed loses." The courtyard was dead silent now. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. A duel with the Knight Commander of the Royal Guard, in front of hundreds of witnesses, including royalty? It was either the opportunity of a lifetime or the fastest way to create an international incident. But as Marcus looked at Gabriel, he saw something that decided him. Beneath the formal challenge, beneath the ceremony and politics, he saw the simple desire of one professional warrior to test himself against another. It was the same feeling Marcus had carried through 15 years of military service. The need to know how good you really were, measured against the best. Marcus straightened and met Gabriel's gaze directly. "I accept." The crowd exploded into excited chatter. On the balcony, King Edmund was discussing something urgently with his advisors. Prince Alexander was practically bouncing with excitement. But Marcus only had eyes for Gabriel, who nodded once with satisfaction. "Excellent. The duel will take place in 1 hour, giving us both time to prepare. The rules are simple. Silence must be maintained from the moment we take our positions until one of us yields. Any unnecessary sound results in immediate disqualification." Gabriel replaced his helmet and stepped back. "I look forward to our contest, Captain. May the better warrior win." As the royal guard marched back into the palace, Marcus remained standing where Gabriel had found him. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, already placing bets on the outcome. Foreign diplomats were whispering urgently to each other, probably wondering if this impromptu duel would cause political complications. But Marcus barely noticed any of it. His mind was already focused on the challenge ahead. In 1 hour, he would face a man who had just demonstrated fighting skills unlike anything he had ever seen. A man who fought like a ghost, moving without sound, striking without warning. Marcus had faced long odds before. He had survived battles where he was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. But this was different. This wasn't about survival or completing a mission. This was about proving himself worthy of the respect of a true master warrior. As he walked toward the guest quarters to prepare, Marcus found himself smiling despite the magnitude of the challenge ahead. Whatever happened in the next hour, it would be a test worthy of the reputation both men had built through years of dedication to their craft. The silent duel was about to begin. The guest quarters assigned to Marcus were luxurious beyond anything he had experienced in his military career. Silk curtains hung from tall windows, and the bed was large enough for 4 people. But Marcus paid no attention to the opulence around him. He sat on the edge of the bed, his mind completely focused on the challenge ahead. He had 1 hour to prepare for a type of combat he had never experienced before. Silent fighting was completely foreign to his training. Marines learned to be loud and aggressive, to overwhelm enemies with superior firepower and coordinated attacks. The idea of fighting without making any sound went against everything he had been taught. Marcus stood and began his preparation routine. First, he checked his equipment carefully. His uniform was practical military issue designed for function rather than appearance. His boots were worn but well-maintained, with soles that gripped well on different surfaces. Unlike Gabriel's ceremonial armor, Marcus would fight in his regular gear. He removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, testing his range of movement. The fabric stretched without restriction. Good. He bent and twisted, making sure nothing would bind at a crucial moment. Satisfied with his mobility, he turned his attention to his weapon. The palace had provided him with a practice sword, similar to what Gabriel would use. Marcus hefted the blade, testing its weight and balance. It was heavier than he expected, with a different feel than modern weapons. The steel was excellent quality, but the design was old-fashioned, more like something from a museum than a battlefield. As he practiced basic movements with the unfamiliar weapon, Marcus thought about what he had observed during the demonstration. Gabriel fought with flowing movements, each action connected to the next in an endless chain. It was beautiful to watch, but Marcus suspected there might be weaknesses in such an approach. The Marine fighting style was built on different principles: economy of movement, direct attacks, overwhelming force applied at the enemy's weakest point. Where Gabriel's style was like a river, flowing around obstacles, Marcus's training was like a hammer, designed to smash through whatever stood in its way. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus opened it to find a young palace servant, barely old enough to shave, holding a silver tray with tea and small cakes. "Compliments of His Majesty," the boy said nervously. "He thought you might want refreshment before your contest." Marcus accepted the tray with thanks, though food was the last thing on his mind. As the servant turned to leave, Marcus called him back. "You've seen Sir Gabriel fight before?" The boy's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh, yes, sir. Many times. Sir Gabriel is amazing. The other guards say he's never lost a single combat, not even in training. They say he can defeat 3 men at once without breaking a sweat." Marcus filed this information away. Undefeated in training was impressive, but it also meant Gabriel might not have experience with truly desperate opponents. Men who had nothing to lose fought differently than those who were used to winning. "What about his style? Does he always fight the same way?" The servant thought for a moment. "Well, sir, he adapts to whoever he's fighting. Against fast opponents, he becomes patient and waits for them to make mistakes. Against strong fighters, he uses their strength against them. The other guards say he's like water. He takes whatever shape the fight requires." After the servant left, Marcus resumed his preparation with new understanding. Gabriel wasn't just skilled, he was intelligent, able to analyze and adapt during combat. This would be even more challenging than Marcus had initially thought. Meanwhile, in his private chambers deep within the palace, Gabriel was conducting his own preparations. Unlike Marcus's sparse quarters, Gabriel's room reflected his position and long service. Weapons from various conflicts lined the walls, and books on military strategy filled tall shelves. Gabriel sat in meditation, a practice that had become essential to his combat effectiveness over the years. His breathing was slow and controlled, his mind completely calm. He visualized the upcoming fight, imagining different scenarios and his responses to each. He had studied Marcus Thompson's military record extensively before issuing his challenge. The American Marine had an impressive service history, with commendations for bravery and tactical thinking. But more importantly, Gabriel had recognized something in the man's bearing during the demonstration, the unmistakable presence of a true warrior. Gabriel rose from meditation and began his physical preparation. He moved through a series of exercises designed to center his body and mind, each movement precise and purposeful. These weren't flashy techniques meant to impress observers. They were practical preparations developed through decades of combat experience. As he practiced, Gabriel reflected on why he had issued this challenge. Officially, the Royal Guard's duties were ceremonial, protecting the royal family during public events and maintaining the traditions of the kingdom. But Gabriel had not always been a palace guard. Before accepting his current position, he had served as a soldier in conflicts across Europe, learning his deadly skills in places where mistakes meant death. The transition to palace life had been difficult. The formal ceremonies and political intricacies of court life were far removed from the direct action of military service. Gabriel missed the clarity of combat, where skill and determination mattered more than politics and protocol. When he had seen Marcus in the crowd, Gabriel had immediately recognized a kindred spirit. Here was someone who understood the weight of command, the burden of making life-and-death decisions. More than that, Marcus carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had been tested by real combat and emerged victorious. The duel was more than just a contest of skills. It was an opportunity for two professional warriors to engage in the pure competition that was at the heart of their calling. Win or lose, both men would leave the contest with a better understanding of their own capabilities. Gabriel completed his warm-up and selected his weapon. Unlike the ornate ceremonial swords used in demonstrations, this blade was purely functional. The steel was perfectly balanced, the edge honed to razor sharpness. It had been his companion through many battles, and its weight in his hand was as familiar as his own heartbeat. Back in the courtyard, preparations were underway for the unusual contest. Word had spread throughout the palace and beyond, drawing an even larger crowd than the original demonstration. Nobles who had planned to depart after the ceremony delayed their travels. Foreign diplomats sent urgent messages to their governments, unsure whether this impromptu duel was significant political theater or merely entertainment. King Edmund observed the preparations from his balcony with mixed feelings. Part of him was excited to witness a genuine test of skill between two renowned warriors, but the practical side of his mind worried about potential complications. If Marcus were injured, it could create diplomatic problems with America. If Gabriel lost, it might damage the reputation of the royal guard. Queen Isabella shared her husband's concerns, but for different reasons. She had grown fond of Gabriel during his years of service, seeing him as the older brother she had never had. The thought of him being injured in what was essentially a game troubled her greatly. Prince Alexander, however, was thrilled beyond measure. At 16, he was old enough to appreciate the skill of both fighters, but young enough to see only the adventure and excitement. He had peppered his tutors with questions about both men's backgrounds, absorbing every detail about their training and combat experience. As the appointed hour approached, servants finished setting up a combat circle in the center of the courtyard. Unlike the larger area used for the demonstration, this space was intimate, forcing the fighters to remain close to each other throughout the contest. Rope barriers kept the crowd at a safe distance while still allowing everyone an excellent view. Palace physicians stood ready to treat any injuries, though both Gabriel and Marcus had insisted that the duel would be conducted with controlled techniques designed to avoid serious harm. This was a test of skill, not a fight to the death. Marcus arrived first, walking steadily across the courtyard with the bearing of a man comfortable in his own skin. He had changed into lighter clothing that wouldn't restrict his movement, but still maintained the neat appearance expected of a military officer. The practice sword hung easily at his side, its weight now familiar after an hour of intensive practice. The crowd fell silent as Gabriel emerged from the palace. He wore simple training clothes rather than his ceremonial armor, practical garments that allowed complete freedom of movement. His sword was equally understated, a working blade rather than a showpiece. The two men met in the center of the combat circle. Up close, the physical differences between them were obvious. Marcus was broader and more heavily muscled, built like someone accustomed to carrying heavy equipment and fighting in close quarters. Gabriel was taller and leaner, with the fluid movement of someone who relied on speed and precision rather than raw strength. "Captain Thompson," Gabriel said formally, "are you prepared for this contest?" "I am," Marcus replied, his voice steady and calm. "Then let us review the rules once more for the benefit of our audience. We will fight in silence from the moment we take our positions until one of us yields or is disarmed. Any unnecessary sound will result in immediate disqualification. The contest ends when one fighter surrenders or can no longer continue. Marcus nodded his understanding. And what constitutes necessary sound? Breathing. The unavoidable sounds of movement and the contact between weapons are permitted. Everything else is forbidden. Both men bowed to the royal family, then to each other. The formalities complete, they moved to opposite sides of the circle and drew their swords. The blades caught the afternoon sunlight, throwing dancing reflections across the faces of the watching crowd. Gabriel raised his sword in the traditional salute, and Marcus mirrored the gesture. For a moment, they stood motionless, each taking the measure of the other. Then Gabriel lowered his blade to the ready position, and the duel began. The silence was immediate and profound. Both fighters moved into their preferred stances without making a sound. Gabriel's position was elegant and balanced, his sword held at a precise angle that could defend or attack with equal ease. Marcus adopted a more aggressive posture, his blade angled forward in a stance designed for quick, powerful strikes. They circled each other slowly, each step carefully placed to avoid any unnecessary noise. The crowd held its breath, understanding instinctively that they were witnessing something special. This wasn't the choreographed beauty of the morning's demonstration. This was real combat, conducted by masters of their respective arts. Gabriel moved first, a probing attack designed to test Marcus's defenses. His blade swept forward in a graceful arc, not intending to score a hit, but to gauge his opponent's reaction time and defensive technique. Marcus responded exactly as Gabriel expected, deflecting the attack with a solid block that spoke of sound training and good reflexes. But Gabriel learned what he needed to know from that brief exchange. Marcus was strong and well-trained, but his technique was straightforward and predictable. The Marine fought like what he was, a soldier accustomed to direct, overwhelming force rather than subtle maneuvering. Marcus, meanwhile, was analyzing Gabriel's attack. The movement had been beautiful and precise, but it also revealed information. Gabriel favored finesse over power, using his opponent's momentum against them rather than meeting force with force. It was an effective approach against most enemies. But Marcus had trained specifically to deal with elusive opponents. They separated and continued their silent circling. The crowd watched in fascination as the two warriors studied each other, each looking for the opening that would give them victory. This was chess played with swords, a battle of minds as much as bodies. Gabriel launched a series of quick attacks, his blade dancing through complex patterns designed to confuse and overwhelm. Each strike flowed into the next with liquid grace, creating a web of steel that seemed impossible to penetrate. The crowd gasped as they watched the display of pure technical skill. But Marcus didn't try to match Gabriel's complexity. Instead, he focused on the fundamentals: strong defense, economy of movement, patience. He blocked what he needed to block and avoided what he could avoid, refusing to be drawn into Gabriel's rhythm. It wasn't elegant, but it was effective. Gabriel's expression showed the first hint of surprise. Most opponents were either overwhelmed by his initial flurry or attempted to match his speed and complexity, allowing him to control the pace of the fight. Marcus was doing neither, instead fighting his own fight at his own pace. The realization forced Gabriel to reassess his opponent. Marcus Thompson wasn't just another skilled fighter, he was a tactician, someone who understood that winning a fight was more important than looking good while doing it. As the duel continued in perfect silence, both warriors began to understand that this contest would be decided not by a single brilliant move, but by endurance, patience, and the ability to adapt when their initial approaches failed. The real test was just beginning. The two warriors had been circling each other for nearly 10 minutes, and the nature of their contest was becoming clear to the watching crowd. This wasn't the quick, decisive clash many had expected. Instead, it was evolving into a test of endurance, patience, and tactical thinking. Gabriel adjusted his strategy, recognizing that his usual approach wouldn't work against Marcus. The Marine's defensive technique was too solid, his positioning too disciplined. Gabriel needed to force Marcus out of his comfort zone to create opportunities through misdirection rather than direct assault. He began incorporating footwork patterns from different fighting traditions, shifting between stances in ways designed to confuse opponents who relied on reading body language to predict attacks. One moment he appeared ready to strike from the left, the next his posture suggested a thrust from the right. Marcus watched these changes with growing respect for his opponent's adaptability. Gabriel wasn't just technically skilled, he was intelligent, constantly analyzing and adjusting his approach based on what he learned about Marcus's capabilities. It was exactly what Marcus would have done in Gabriel's position. But Marcus had advantages of his own. His military training had included psychological warfare, the art of using an opponent's expectations against them. Gabriel expected him to fight like a traditional soldier, direct, aggressive, predictable. Marcus decided to give him something different. Without warning, Marcus shifted to a defensive stance that was completely unlike his previous positioning. Instead of the aggressive forward posture he had maintained, he adopted a patient, almost passive guard that invited attack while revealing nothing about his intentions. The change caught Gabriel off guard. For the first time in the duel, he hesitated, unsure how to interpret this unexpected development. Was Marcus growing tired and shifting to a more defensive approach? Or was this a deliberate tactical change designed to lure Gabriel into a trap? The hesitation lasted only a fraction of a second, but Marcus noticed it. Gabriel was human after all, capable of uncertainty and doubt like any other fighter. That knowledge was valuable. It meant Gabriel could be surprised, possibly confused, maybe even manipulated if Marcus was clever enough. Gabriel decided to test Marcus's new defensive posture with a series of careful probes. His attacks were measured and controlled, designed to gather information rather than score decisive hits. Each strike targeted a different area, high, low, left, right, mapping the boundaries of Marcus's defensive capabilities. Marcus responded to each probe with minimal movement, deflecting attacks with the smallest possible adjustment of his blade. He was conserving energy while forcing Gabriel to work harder for each bit of information he gained. It was a smart, tactical decision, but it also revealed Marcus's growing fatigue. The physical demands of maintaining perfect silence while fighting were enormous. Every movement had to be precisely controlled to avoid unnecessary noise. Breathing had to be managed carefully. Even the placement of feet required constant attention to prevent scuffing sounds that would result in disqualification. Gabriel, despite his superior conditioning for this type of combat, was also beginning to feel the strain. His flowing, elegant movements required tremendous muscle control, and the mental concentration needed to maintain perfect silence was exhausting. Both fighters were approaching the limits of their endurance. The crowd sensed the building tension. What had begun as an exciting spectacle was becoming something deeper, a profound test of human will and skill. Nobles who had come expecting entertainment found themselves witnessing a demonstration of dedication and discipline that few of them had ever imagined possible. Prince Alexander leaned forward on the balcony, studying every detail of the combat. His tutors had taught him about various fighting styles, but seeing them applied in real time was a revelation. He could see how Gabriel's technique emphasized efficiency and flow, while Marcus relied on solid fundamentals and tactical thinking. King Edmund was equally fascinated, though his perspective was different. As a ruler, he understood the value of having warriors like Gabriel protecting his family. But seeing Marcus's capabilities made him realize that the world beyond his kingdom contained threats that required more than ceremonial guards to address. Queen Isabella watched with growing concern as both fighters showed signs of fatigue. The contest had already lasted longer than anyone expected, and she worried that pride would prevent either man from yielding when wisdom suggested they should stop. Gabriel made his next move, shifting to a more aggressive approach designed to pressure Marcus into making a mistake. His attacks became faster and more complex, each strike flowing into the next without pause. He was gambling that he could overwhelm Marcus's defenses before his own energy reserves were completely depleted. Marcus felt the increased pressure immediately. Gabriel's speed was impressive, and maintaining his defensive posture against such an assault required enormous concentration. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool afternoon air, and his breathing became more labored. But Marcus had been in desperate situations before. His military career had included moments when failure meant death, when the only option was to endure whatever the enemy could dish out and wait for an opportunity to strike back. This felt familiar, even comforting in its way. He absorbed Gabriel's assault with grim determination, giving ground when necessary but never allowing his defensive line to collapse. Each of Gabriel's strikes was met with a solid block or deflection, turning the knight's elegant technique into a war of attrition that favored the more heavily built marine. Gabriel realized his gamble wasn't working. Marcus's defense was too strong, his conditioning too good. The prolonged assault was exhausting Gabriel more than his opponent, and he couldn't maintain this pace much longer without making a critical error. As if reading Gabriel's thoughts, Marcus chose that moment to launch his own attack. It wasn't the graceful, flowing assault that Gabriel favored. Instead, it was a series of powerful, straightforward strikes designed to test Gabriel's defensive capabilities while forcing him to work harder. Gabriel met the assault with his own defensive technique, but the difference in their approaches was stark. Where Marcus's defense had been patient and economical, Gabriel's was active and dynamic, using movement and redirection rather than simple blocking to handle incoming attacks. The exchange lasted nearly a minute before both fighters separated, breathing hard and re-evaluating their positions. Each had gained valuable information about the other's capabilities and limitations. More importantly, both had demonstrated that they possessed the skill and determination to continue this contest much longer than anyone had anticipated. The crowd was completely silent now, afraid that any sound they made might interfere with the duel. They sensed that they were witnessing something extraordinary, not just a contest of physical skill, but a meeting of minds between two masters of their respective arts. Gabriel wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his free hand, a gesture that Marcus noted with interest. The knight was human after all, subject to the same physical limitations that affected everyone else. But Gabriel's quick recovery and renewed focus reminded Marcus that his opponent's endurance was probably superior to his own. Marcus made a tactical decision. He couldn't match Gabriel's elegance or technical perfection, but he could control the pace and rhythm of the fight. Instead of waiting for Gabriel to dictate terms, Marcus began to press forward with steady, measured aggression. His attacks weren't flashy or complex, but they were relentless. Each strike forced Gabriel to respond, to expend energy and mental focus on defense. Marcus was turning the duel into the kind of grinding, attritional contest where his military training gave him an advantage. Gabriel adapted to this new pressure with characteristic intelligence. Rather than trying to match Marcus's straightforward approach, he used superior footwork to create angles that made the Marine's attacks less effective. It was like fighting a moving target that was never quite where Marcus expected it to be. The tactical chess match intensified as both fighters settled into a rhythm that could potentially continue for a very long time. Gabriel used mobility and technical skill to avoid decisive engagement, while Marcus applied steady pressure designed to wear down his opponent's energy reserves. Minutes passed without either fighter gaining a significant advantage. The crowd watched in growing amazement as the duel continued with no sign that either warrior was ready to yield. This wasn't just a demonstration of fighting skill. It was a testament to human endurance and determination. Both fighters were operating on pure professional instinct now, their conscious minds focused entirely on the immediate demands of combat. Gabriel's movements remained fluid and precise despite his fatigue, while Marcus maintained his disciplined approach even as his muscles screamed for rest. The true test of their skills was just beginning. Everything that had happened so far was preparation for the final phase of their contest, when exhaustion would strip away everything except the core essence of their respective fighting arts. In the silence of perfect concentration, two masters approached the moment when one of them would finally prove superior to the other. The crowd held its breath, sensing that the climax of this extraordinary duel was finally at hand. Neither Gabriel nor Marcus showed any intention of yielding. Their pride as warriors, their respect for each other's skill, and their desire to test themselves against a worthy opponent drove them forward despite the growing demands of their contest. The silent duel was about to reach its inevitable conclusion. 20 minutes had passed since the duel began, and both fighters were reaching the limits of human endurance. Their clothes were soaked with sweat despite the cool afternoon air, and their breathing had become labored. Yet neither showed any sign of yielding. Gabriel's elegant technique had simplified under the pressure of exhaustion, but his movements remained precise and controlled. Years of training in the silent fighting arts had conditioned him for exactly this type of prolonged contest. His body knew how to conserve energy while maintaining effectiveness, drawing on reserves of strength built through decades of disciplined practice. Marcus, despite being less familiar with silent combat, was adapting with the resilience that had carried him through 15 years of military service. His technique had also simplified, but in his case, it meant returning to the fundamental principles that had been drilled into him from his first day of training. Simple blocks, direct attacks, solid positioning, the basics that worked when everything else failed. The crowd watched in complete fascination as the two warriors pushed themselves beyond what seemed humanly possible. This had evolved far beyond a mere demonstration or friendly contest. It had become a pure test of will, skill, and determination between two masters of their respective arts. Prince Alexander found himself holding his breath during particularly intense exchanges. His young mind was absorbing lessons about dedication and perseverance that no tutor could have taught him. Here were two men who refused to quit, who pushed themselves to their absolute limits in pursuit of excellence. King Edmund observed the duel with growing respect for both participants. As a leader, he understood the value of men who possessed this level of commitment and skill. Whether this contest ended in victory or defeat for either fighter, both had already proven themselves worthy of admiration. Queen Isabella worried about the physical toll the prolonged contest was taking on both men. She could see the exhaustion in their movements, the strain in their faces. Yet she also recognized that stopping the duel now would be an insult to the dedication both fighters were demonstrating. Gabriel made a subtle adjustment to his strategy, recognizing that the contest was entering its final phase. His superior conditioning gave him a slight advantage in a war of attrition, but Marcus's mental toughness was proving more formidable than expected. Gabriel needed to find a way to end the duel decisively before his own energy reserves were completely depleted. He began incorporating deceptive movements into his attacks, techniques designed to mask his true intentions until the last possible moment. It was a high-risk strategy that required perfect timing and execution, but Gabriel sensed that a conventional approach wouldn't be enough to defeat his determined opponent. Marcus noticed the change immediately. Gabriel's attacks were becoming less predictable, more dangerous. The knight was raising the stakes, gambling everything on a few decisive moments rather than continuing the grinding war of attrition that had characterized most of their contest. The realization focused Marcus's mind like a laser. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the point where Gabriel would be forced to commit fully to an attack, creating the opening that Marcus needed to turn the tables. All his military training came down to recognizing and exploiting such opportunities. Gabriel launched a series of feints designed to confuse Marcus's defensive timing. Each movement suggested a different attack, forcing Marcus to prepare for threats from multiple angles simultaneously. It was a masterful display of technical skill, the kind of complex assault that had overwhelmed countless opponents in the past. But Marcus didn't try to defend against all the possible attacks. Instead, he focused on reading Gabriel's true intentions beneath the layers of deception. His years of combat experience had taught him to look past what an enemy appeared to be doing and focus on what they were actually planning. The crucial moment arrived when Gabriel committed to a real attack disguised as another feint. His blade swept toward Marcus in a complex arc designed to slip past the Marine's defenses through pure technical superiority. It was a brilliant move, executed with perfect precision. Marcus recognized the true attack a split second before it would have connected. His response was pure instinct, born from hundreds of hours of training and real combat experience. Instead of trying to block the strike conventionally, he stepped inside Gabriel's reach and trapped the knight's sword arm with his free hand. For a moment, both fighters were locked in close combat, their weapons temporarily neutralized. Gabriel's eyes widened in surprise. This wasn't how the encounter was supposed to develop. His fighting style relied on maintaining distance and using superior technique to control the engagement. Marcus pressed his advantage, using his greater physical strength to control Gabriel's movements while maneuvering for a decisive strike. This was exactly the kind of close-quarters combat where his military training gave him a significant advantage. But Gabriel was far too experienced to be defeated by a single unexpected move. He used his superior flexibility to slip partially out of Marcus's grip, creating just enough space to bring his weapon back into play. The two fighters separated, both breathing heavily from the intense close combat exchange. The brief grappling match had changed the dynamic of their duel. Both men now understood that their opponent was capable of adapting to any situation, of finding solutions to problems that would have defeated lesser fighters. The mutual respect that had begun their contest deepened into something approaching genuine admiration. Gabriel acknowledged Marcus's skill with a slight nod that only his opponent could see. The Marine's ability to read and counter his deceptive attack demonstrated tactical intelligence of the highest order. This wasn't just a strong soldier following orders. This was a thinking fighter who could adapt and improvise under pressure. Marcus returned the acknowledgement with his own subtle gesture of respect. Gabriel's recovery from the grappling situation had been masterful, showing exactly the kind of technical skill and mental composure that made him a legendary fighter. With their mutual assessment complete, both warriors prepared for the final phase of their contest. They had tested each other's technical skills, physical conditioning, and tactical intelligence. Now it would come down to pure determination. Which of them wanted victory more, and which was willing to pay the higher price to achieve it? Gabriel shifted to his most aggressive fighting stance, abandoning the elegant restraint that had characterized most of his technique. If this contest was going to be decided by raw determination, he would meet Marcus on those terms. His attacks became faster and more direct, seeking to overwhelm through sheer intensity rather than technical superiority. Marcus met this final assault with everything he had left. His defensive technique was no longer pretty or textbook perfect, but it was effective. Each of Gabriel's strikes was met with determined resistance, turning their contest into exactly the kind of brutal test of will that Marcus had been preparing for his entire military career. The crowd watched in amazed silence as the two exhausted warriors pushed themselves beyond what seemed humanly possible. Their movements had lost much of their earlier precision, but the raw intensity of their contest was breathtaking. This wasn't just a fight, it was a demonstration of human potential, of what could be achieved through dedication and refusal to quit. For several minutes, neither fighter gained a decisive advantage. Gabriel's technical skill was matched by Marcus's tactical intelligence. The knight's superior conditioning was offset by the Marine's mental toughness. It was as close to a perfectly matched contest as either man had ever experienced. Then Gabriel made a tiny mistake, a moment of imperfect foot placement that left him slightly off balance for less than a second. In normal circumstances, it would have been meaningless. But after 25 minutes of intense combat, both fighters were operating on such narrow margins that even the smallest error could prove decisive. Marcus saw the opening and reacted with lightning speed. His attack wasn't elegant or complex. It was a straightforward thrust designed to take advantage of Gabriel's momentary vulnerability. Everything he had learned about timing and opportunity came together in a single decisive moment. Gabriel recognized his error and attempted to recover, but exhaustion had slowed his reflexes just enough to make the difference. Marcus's blade slipped past his defenses and stopped just inches from his throat, held there by the Marine's iron control. The silence in the courtyard was absolute. For a long moment, neither fighter moved. Gabriel stared at the blade at his throat, while Marcus held his position with rock-steady hands despite his exhaustion. The contest was over, but both men needed a moment to process what had just happened. Gabriel stepped back carefully, and Marcus lowered his weapon. Both fighters were breathing heavily, sweat streaming down their faces, but their eyes held only mutual respect. Gabriel raised his sword in a formal salute, acknowledging Marcus's victory with the grace that befitted a true warrior. Marcus returned the salute, his own respect for Gabriel's skill clearly visible. The contest had been decided by the narrowest possible margin, a single moment of imperfection after 25 minutes of near-perfect combat. On another day, with slightly different circumstances, the outcome could easily have been reversed. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, finally able to release the tension they had been holding throughout the extraordinary duel. They had witnessed something remarkable, not just a contest of skill, but a demonstration of human excellence that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. King Edmund stood and applauded both fighters, his expression showing genuine admiration for their skill and determination. Prince Alexander was practically bouncing with excitement, while Queen Isabella looked relieved that both warriors had emerged from their contest without serious injury. Gabriel approached Marcus as the crowd continued its celebration. "Well fought, Captain," he said, his voice hoarse from exertion but filled with sincere respect. "I have never faced a more worthy opponent." Marcus clasped the offered hand firmly. "The honor was mine, Sir Gabriel. Your skill is everything I heard it was, and more." As they stood together in the center of the courtyard, both exhausted but unbroken, the two warriors shared a moment of understanding that transcended their different backgrounds and training. They had pushed each other to their absolute limits and emerged from the experience with profound mutual respect. The silent duel had ended not with the crushing defeat of one fighter by another, but with the recognition that both men possessed the rare combination of skill, determination, and character that marked them as true masters of their craft. In the days that followed, the story of their contest would spread throughout the kingdom and beyond. It would be remembered not just as an entertaining spectacle, but as an example of what human beings could achieve when they dedicated themselves completely to the pursuit of excellence. Gabriel would return to his duties as knight commander with renewed appreciation for the warriors who served beyond the palace walls. Marcus would carry with him the memory of facing a true master, a reminder that excellence could be found in unexpected places and that there was always more to learn. But in that moment, as they stood together before the cheering crowd, both men understood that they had participated in something special. The silent duel had tested them both and found them worthy, not just as fighters but as warriors in the truest sense of the word. Their contest was over, but the respect and friendship that grew from it would last for the rest of their lives.